Hello, we are Evan Meaney and Simon Tarr, two professors and researchers at the University of South Carolina, and this is our presentation of an interface demo, a proof of concept of an alpha version of our project, VRchive. VRchive is a project that will allow media archives to take advantage of virtual spaces in the presentations of their holdings. We're really interested in the ways that media archives can take advantage of virtual spaces. When you think about how searching works, we usually think of the habits that we've developed in flat 2D digital spaces. We use a search engine. We think of a query and we hope for good results to come back, and then we evaluate the results of our search. First, by making some educated guesses when we look at the list of the search results, and then also by pouring through many of those results item by item. We use a browser, typically a web browser, to look at the returns from the database. And that term, web browser, has become sort of ironic because it's not actually very good at browsing. When you think of the kind of serendipity that happens when you're, say, walking through a stack of books in a library, or maybe perusing titles in a vintage video store, if you see any of those, or if you can remember going to one of those. We can all remember stumbling upon things that we didn't expect. You see the books that are nearby the book that you thought you were looking for. You see videos that are nearby on the shelves. And these things turn out to be valuable when you didn't expect them to be. Or maybe they triggered ideas that you wouldn't have had if you hadn't stumbled upon those new items. With VRchive, we're attempting to build a more intuitive way to search for media holdings, more intuitive than is usually afforded by a simple web browser. And we're also trying to recapture that visceral, tactile serendipity that is really hard to experience both in the aesthetics of a web search and also very difficult to do no matter what with time-based media. So that is the core of the project that we're going to demonstrate for you here. We want to thank the University of South Carolina's Aspire grant program through the Vice President of Research's office for the seed funding to develop this demo. And we also want to thank our partners at the University of South Carolina's Moving Image Research Collections that provided uh, the the uh, the footage that you're going to see in this demo, and uh, and also the Research Cyber Infrastructure Group at the University of South Carolina. We have a lot of partners that are working with us to get this closer and closer to a reality. So let's now start this up and go into the VRchive environment and see what we can find. All right, we're entering the VRchive environment here, and I'll start by making a query by entering aviation. Let's see what happens here. Whoa. Well, here we are inside the VRchive environment. And by entering the search query aviation, it's looked into the database at the Moving Image Research Collections here at the University of South Carolina, and it's returning uh, search results, just as you would expect from perhaps a more traditional web interface, except now instead of a 2D windowed environment where we see a list of returns and we could you know, go one by one into those. Here we're presented with a visual array of of films. They have titles you can see here, like I'm looking right here at Roscoe Turner Attempts a Record Flight Outtakes. Each of the entries has has a cycle of sample frames to give me a better sense of what might be in that film. And I'm in an environment here. I can look around, and as I look around, I'm moving around slowly for those of you who are looking at this on a screen, so you're not too disoriented. But I can look around very quickly. It's very natural. Um, and this first uh, array here that's right in front of me, the closest films to me, there's 32 returns. That's the first page, akin to a first page of a web search. And if you look just beyond that, it's darker and kind of floating around in the background. There are more clips uh, that I could access, and they could show me the second and third pages beyond my initial search results. But for now, we're just going to stick with what's in the first set of results here on the first page. What am I going to do though? I'm looking at all this stuff, but I actually want to interact with these things. This leads to the perennial question in virtual reality of what do you do with your hands? I have two hand controllers here, and I've stored them out of sight here so I can pick them up one by one and tell you about them. So I'm going to look down and pick up my right hand controller. Here it is. And this is a standard hand controller for this particular device, the Vive. And it sort of looks like a lightsaber. I have this thing pointing off into infinity. And when I point at things, well, this works like my mouse cursor on a normal computer, right? I point at things, and when I hover over them, they sort of pop out at me, right? Well, this is in fact my selecting device. I can use, if you look at it here, I'm holding it in front of my face, there's a trigger. If I squeeze that trigger, that acts like a mouse button, and I can just choose things. So let's choose, I'm going to point over here. I'm looking at the moving image flight plan of Apollo 11. So I'm going to click on this. But wait, what's it going to do? Well, that raises the question of what am I doing with my other hand? This is my right hand. Let's look down to what my left hand should be doing. Aha, there's another controller. This controller has my display. Please select an entry. I see a little proscenium here, and this is where when I select any video, it's going to show up right here in this proscenium. There's other things going on here. I'll tell you about that. But this controller also has a trigger and has some controllers that I'll tell you a little bit more about. But first, let's make a selection. So here we go. I'm going to select flight plan of Apollo 11. Ready? Here we go. Let's hold this and let's look. All right. When I select it, it starts playing. I can hold it closer. I can look at other stuff while it's playing. But there it is. Now let's control some of these things. I can play and pause using the trigger. There's all kinds of buttons over here. If I forget what they are, there's a tiny little button right up here that will give me floating instructions on what these buttons do. So I've got fast forward, rewind, play, pause, and then squeeze buttons on the side here. And I'll show you what those do in just a moment. So I can fast forward, I can rewind, I can play, I can pause, play again. Right? So it works very intuitively. Feels good. As somebody who wears progressive lens glasses, I have a habit when I'm reading things or holding things in my hands to hold them kind of close and lean forward and look through the bottom of my glasses because that's where I have more magnification. There's no reason for me to do that. It's just a habit that I have. There's no reason to do that in a VR headset because the focus is pretty much the same no matter what I'm doing. But I can use my tactile habits to work with this footage the way I would work with something that I'm holding in my hands. You can see the frame counter there. There's other stuff here going on. Let's hold this back. So we see over here, we have a description. There we have the title, we have the catalog number, 1969 silent color. All right, so we have information here and a description of the film. Oops, let's turn off there we go. And a description of the film. shot of the Apollo 11, all kinds of information. We also have some other elements down here. Let's work through those, shall we? So I'm going to choose this heart icon here. I know I like this film. I know I like this Apollo 11 artist's depiction. And when I leave the VRchive environment, I'm pretty sure I want to talk to the archivist about this and see if I can get a hold of the original, or maybe see what kind of other ancillary materials might accompany this film. But I know I'm not done. I don't want to just I don't want to have to take my headset off and write it down. I don't want to have to bring another person with me to transcribe what I'm saying. I'm still working here. I just want to save this for later. So I'm going to hit this heart icon. This marks it, and it also makes it turn pink. Gives it a pink glow in the background here. And this pink glow is persistent. So I'll deselect this. I'll just point this at nothing. I'll just point at the ground. And that is going to be glowing pink until I go back and turn it off. So when I leave the archive environment, all the things that I have marked as pink are going to be ready for me to have as a collected list, and we can work with that material later. So let's look at something else. You stay pink. All right. Let's check. Yep, it's still pink. So let's look around. What do we got? Okay, I'm just going to pick, let's say, moving image flight over Prague outtakes. So I'm going to select this. Okay, it's a sound film. I have the volume turned down a bit because I don't want it to overpower my descriptions of what's going on. And the same sort of thing. I have information, sound, black and white, 1934. I know I like this. This is oops, it was too short. I fast forwarded all the way through. This is good stuff. I'm going to mark this for later. That's good. I'm also curious about other stuff that's marked with the year 1934. So I'm going to point my pointer with my right hand here at 1934 and pull the trigger, and it's going to select other clips that share that metadata. Let me deselect this. So now we have all kinds of things out here that share this year in the metadata. The material that I have already selected for later still is pink. And now I have added a new parameter to my search. I said, okay, give me 1934 from these search results. It keeps all the other search results. I can look at all this stuff, but it has marked the things with 1934. This is very useful. So now I can use this to kind of intuitively look around and decide what I want to do with this information. So I'm going to say, hey, what about this Sir Charles Kingsford Smith flight outtakes? I'm interested in that. Let's see what's going on here. I'm going to choose that. Here we go. It's also sound. Let's see. Oh, I know I like this. It's action-packed. I'm going to mark this. Good. Here's the thing about this metadata, though. As archival film aficionados, which I know you are, this isn't very much information. This isn't all that useful. I mean, it's useful, but there's a lot more to it than that. There's got to be more metadata, isn't there? And in fact, there is. Here on my left hand, I'm holding this. I'm holding the screen, and there. Oh boy. Shh. And there are squeeze buttons here. If I just squeeze my my fist around the controller here, it's going to cycle through the metadata. So I have all the other tags that have shown up in the XML tags, right? And they're showing up here the way they would be pulled out of the database. So now I'm curious. I've already got this information with the blue stuff marked with 1934, but now, I don't know, I want to look at one of these other ones. I can select these too. Oops, sorry. I want to select one of these too, so I'm going to select Air Pilots. I'm curious about that. And now, let me just point this at nothing. Notice what's going on here. All of these, all of the film clips in my selection that share that metadata, you can think of the metadata as kind of a thread that ties these things together. We have sort of a blue thread that's tying together all the clips from 1934. We have a red thread that's tying together all the clips that share the metadata tag of air pilots. So this is pretty useful stuff. However, I'm getting tired, I gotta say, looking around like this. So I want to sort these things. Right now, I've got this sorted by date, and that might be useful. I could sort things by length, and it moves things around. That's also not that useful for me in this particular case, so I'm going to sort by relevance. And that brings all of the red tag material right in front of me, right here. I know now that it's sorted by relevance, I don't have to worry that there's stuff behind me that I can't see. The stuff that I saved is still over here, all the pink stuff, right? Sorry, I had an itch. I still have a body, and my nose itches sometimes. So here, all the material that is relevant has now been sorted. I've taken that red thread of metadata of the air pilot's metadata, and I've pulled on that thread to bring them all together. And now I can leisurely sit here and choose each of these clips, work through them, decide which ones I want to mark for later, and then when I leave the VRchive environment, I'm ready to go to my partners in the archive and collect that material or look further into the originals, or I can jump out and make another query and see what else happens. So that is an example of our alpha version of this proof of concept interface test for VRchive. We really look forward to talking with you about details for the future, things that we want to implement and evolve, and hope to work with many of you in the future as we develop this into a working beta and eventually expand it to many media archives around the world. Thanks very much for your time.